Welcome to Solar Freedom, your home, your roof, your power, your frontline resource for defending the freedom and independence of rooftop solar. I'm Dave Rosenfeld, Executive Director of the Solar Rights Alliance.
And I'm Cailey Underhill, Advocacy and Development Director of the Solar Rights Alliance. We're here to unpack the latest threats to rooftop solar and put the power back in your hands by giving you the tools to fight back.
All right, well, let's get into it. Cailey, what's the latest in rooftop solar?
Well, the legislative session just ended a few weeks ago, and it was quite a turbulent legislative session. And we have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that the bill that would have broken 2 million rooftop solar contracts did not pass. This is AB 942, and this bill would have broken 2 million rooftop solar contracts across the state of California. Unfortunately, a good bill, SB 710, also did not pass. That bill would have extended the rooftop solar property tax exemption for another 5 years.
Yeah, so it was a big deal that SB 710 didn't pass. We're going to be definitely coming back next year. It's going to be a big priority to make sure it does. Your property taxes don't go up when you install rooftop solar panels, and that's because of a very specific thing in the law. It makes sense because when you put solar panels on your roof, it's not like you're adding to your burden on public infrastructure. If anything, when you put solar panels on your roof, you reduce your burden on public infrastructure. In fact, thank you, rooftop solar customers. In 2024 alone, you saved all ratepayers $1.5 billion, thanks to you. So take a bow. However, this exemption has to get renewed every couple of years, and it's going to expire in 2027. So this year, we were hoping that Senator Catherine Blake Spear's bill, SB 710, would extend that exemption. Unfortunately, the powers that be in the legislature, under pressure from the utilities, made sure that that bill didn't pass. However, next year we have one more year to make sure that it does pass. It's going to be a priority because obviously if we don't extend the property tax exemption, effectively that's a solar tax, and that is a red line because they should never, ever, ever be taxing you for putting solar panels on your roof.
Through everything that has happened in this legislative session, you, Dave, took a bit of a deep dive look at what happened with some of these bills that went the way we wanted them to, and then the bills that didn't go the way that we wanted them to. And what did you find out?
Well, what I found out, in your words, is that water is wet, meaning that the evidence is very clear that when more constituents like you call and email your state legislators, those state legislators are much more likely to vote to defend your rooftop solar investment. And the opposite is true. When less people pick up the phone and call their legislators or send an email, then those legislators are much less likely to defend your investment and much more likely to side with the utilities. And it's really clear. It's really clear. You can just look at it in the numbers. And so your phone calls and your emails really matter. Also, when you share our email alerts and other information that we put out with other people that you know and get them to sign up on our list and pay attention to our alerts and take action, that also is really impactful. So please keep that up. And if you're ever in the back of your head going like, should I share this piece of information with other solar owners and supporters that I know, please do it over and over again, because that really is the difference between a legislator going with the utilities, which is much easier for them to do. The utilities shower them with money, or do the harder thing, which is to side with you.
Yes.
So keep it up, folks.
Yeah. And, we have an awesome guest here today who's going to talk with us about this very thing. She's been working on consumer rights issues for decades. And so she has decades of experience with what happens when people use their voice and stand up against these special interests who have way more money than generally the regular average public ever will, and can shower politicians with donations. But what happens when individuals stand up, use their voice, call their legislators, send emails? How can a difference be made? And so she's here to talk with us about that today, and we're very excited to have her here today.
Our next guest is Jenn Engstrom, the State Director of the California Public Interest Research Group, or CALPIRG. CALPIRG is a consumer advocate. So when consumers are cheated or public health is threatened, CALPIRG works to give the public good, independent information and also advocates on behalf of consumers to local government, state government, our federal government. Jenn, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Jenn, we're so glad you're here. And I've had the chance to work literally side by side with you a number of times. But I realized the other day that for all that we have worked together before, I have never actually asked you like how you came to do this work.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I mean, I'm a rare millennial in that I have been doing the same thing for a very long time. I've been working with the PIRGs for about 20 years. I found the organization when I was in college. I grew up in Sacramento. I was raised by a fairly civic-minded household. So, my mom brought me to school board meetings and to events at the Capitol, and we talked about problems in our world, threats to our environment, to our public health. When I got to Berkeley, I was just looking for a group that was doing something about the problems that I was learning about from my family or in college. I wanted to get involved in, social change, making my community a better place. And I found CALPIRG. They were registering people to vote. I think it was the 2006 gubernatorial election. And I thought that seems good. We need to get people, registered to vote. This seems like a group that's doing some good. And I got involved. The first thing I did with the organization is I worked on a campaign to tackle the high cost of textbooks. So textbooks are really expensive for college students. I had just, joined, I just started college, so I just paid a bunch of money.
Sure.
And I learned that they're kind of arbitrarily expensive, that the textbook industry will do things like change a couple of page numbers or a couple of photos to, come out with a new edition. And then every time they come out with a new edition, they would increase the prices of textbooks. I also learned that they were actually not being very transparent about the price of textbooks to professors. So professors couldn't take price into account when choosing textbooks. So, I kind of learned that there were things happening in the industry that were harmful for, students as consumers. And so I decided to get involved in a campaign to actually pass a bill that would have required the textbook publishing industry to do things like disclose prices to textbooks or to professors and to, note the changes between editions. So I thought this was just a really common sense thing that made sense. I learned to do things like speak to my elected officials and get people to sign petitions. And we did all of this organizing work. And then at the end, the bill actually passed the legislature, but was vetoed by the governor. And it's because he was lobbied really hard by the textbook publishing industry. And we lost my first campaign.
Sounds familiar.
And so that was like the real aha for me, that I realized, the real power of special interests, of corporations that can, work to kind of twist our public policies for their own ends at the expense of the public, even when something is, really common sense and, clearly good for consumers and clearly good for the public. And that really kind of irked me and got me to be more invested in this work. And I've been basically doing the same thing ever since.
Good for you. And also, may I just say, as a former student myself, and on behalf of my former students, I used to be a teacher, thank you for all the work that you did to try to make textbooks be something that the average student could afford.
Well, I will say that we went back again, actually worked at the federal level, got even more students involved, and were able to pass that policy eventually in the 2008 Higher Education Act. So also a good lesson in when folks come together, you can build enough political power to overcome that opposition. It's hard, and it's necessary to have groups like CALPIRG, working on these fights.
What drives you to continue to want to protect consumer rights today?
Well, it's not that different. I mean, I think that, clearly we need a voice out there to defend consumers. Corporations, whether it's textbook companies or big ag or drug companies or the utilities, they are really all about their financial bottom line. They're supposed to be. That's kind of how they're designed and, why they exist. But that means that there's potential for harms to consumers in our marketplace if there's not a group out there, looking to make sure that these business decisions are taking our health and our safety and, just financial protections for consumers into account. And there have been just plenty of examples in my life where I've been really frustrated with some of the, business decisions that companies are making that do put consumers, in harm's way. Toxic chemicals is a big one for me. There's way too many products out there that are made with chemicals that are known to harm the public. My grandfather was a mechanic. He worked on cars his whole life, and a lot of old cars had asbestos in them, which is, connected to cancer. And car companies knew that, but continued to use, asbestos. My grandfather eventually got and died from cancer. Those stories, really have impacted me and impacted my family. And I think that there is just a clear need for a group to be out there working to defend the public and making sure that our marketplace is safe.
CALPIRG was a really great ally in this recent fight to defend 2 million rooftop solar contracts from getting broken through this bill, AB 942. We walked the halls of the Capitol together, lobbying lawmakers. You guys mobilized your members. You helped to build the coalition of organizations that stood up. So you guys worked really hard on this bill, and we thank you for that. Do you have any takeaways from that fight to defend rooftop solar contracts? And if so, what are they?
I mean, as your listeners know, that bill was defeated. And I think that's because there were, solar customers, environmental groups, consumer groups like us that spoke out. I heard from the legislature that this is one of the bills that they were getting the most phone calls on. And that's a big deal. In the state of California, there's like 2,000 bills that are introduced every single legislative session. So for something to, be the thing that got the most pushback, that is incredibly indicative of how many people, care about an issue. And that shows how many people really care about solar. I also think that group of people is growing. So, the more that solar grows, the more people have solar, the more political power that the solar rights movement has. And, when a group of citizens coalesce around an issue, they can get the attention of the legislature. So even though on that bill, we were up against, big entities like the utilities that are incredibly powerful, we were able to defeat them. And so one of my takeaways is just that solar advocates have power, the public has power, and our power is growing. And it was really exciting to see that. Now, at the same time, it wasn't easy, right? I mean, we had to do a lot of work, and that's because the utilities have been working really hard to convince the public that solar rooftop customers are to blame for utility bills going up in California. And the dynamics behind utility bills are really complicated and not necessarily easy to understand. And so, they have an opportunity to really confuse the public there. And so my other takeaway is that we just need to be doing a better job of really kind of educating the public on what the real drivers are, behind our increasing utility bills. Things like overspending, high profit rates. These are the things that we really need to be tackling. And we need to start by making sure that decision makers and the public know what these real drivers are.
Completely agree with that, that there's a bigger issue here of just like, why are utility prices so high? If not rooftop solar, it's what you just said. And there's a lot of confusion, especially in the halls of Sacramento. A lot of that confusion gets created by utility campaign contributions. It's amazing how money can do a great job of making somebody feel confused. What's on CALPIRG's radar? What kinds of things are you thinking of working on or doing going forward, either on just purely the cost of utility prices, or in addition, just rooftop solar as well?
Well, a big thing for us is working to, shed a light on what is genuinely driving up high utility bills. I think, again, rooftop solar customers have been blamed, and that's not accurate. And so we really do need to, to shed a light on what's really happening here. So, nearly all rate increases are due to utility spending increases. So when power companies spend money on everything from what's called capital projects, so things like power line infrastructure, to wildfire liability, to their really high management salaries, all of those costs go back onto ratepayers. And the real problem is that the utility business model is designed to really encourage spending and overspending, especially the investment in these really high cost projects. And that's because it provides the opportunity to earn a return on profits for their shareholders. And California utilities are allowed higher than average rate of return, so above 10%. That's higher than most states. And the problem is the cost of that. So all of that money, including those profit rates, are really falling back on consumers. And so one of the things that we want to do is work to decrease those allowable profit rates as a way to really bring down the overall costs for consumers. We also want to make sure that there is not just unnecessary overspending, that the utilities are being thoughtful about, how to spend money.
We so desperately need a voice like CALPIRG getting in there on all the things you just mentioned. Desperately. There is such a void in Sacramento of good, trustworthy voices who are just really providing the information to decision makers about what is the problem. We just see lawmakers over and over again talking about high electricity prices, but then just totally barking up the wrong tree. We completely support that effort. We want to help you with that. That's just so great that you guys are focused on that.
In terms of the legislature, there is one other kind of issue that we're thinking about. We want to bring back this upcoming legislative session, which is around protecting against property tax increases for solar customers. So I don't know if this is something that you all have been, talking about on the podcast.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Funny you mention it.
Yeah, great minds.
Well, anyways, I mean, we also, agree that, consumers should not have, their property taxes automatically, increased just because they're adding, rooftop solar. That doesn't really, make sense. It's not the same as, a huge renovation, adding a level or an ADU. And this is something that the California, consumers through the ballot have, affirmed, and the legislature has, reapproved several times. And it's up for a sunset. So we want to make sure that, this protection is continuing in the state. So that's something that we're going to be working on next legislative session as well.
Well, great. It looks like we'll have lots more opportunity to be walking the halls together and alerting our respective members and the public.
And I know, too, a lot of the things that you've named, Jen, and to what you were speaking to as well, Dave, these are big issues. The utilities are this giant century-old monolith that's like fighting hard to protect their profit model. And when you're just one person and you're trying to figure out how do I impact this issue, and like you said, this is a thing that has happened over and over and over again. I think a lot of our listeners are sitting there thinking to themselves, okay, but I'm just like one person. What am I supposed to do against like a giant entity like this?
Well, the first thing I would say is that you don't need to be one person. So you could join a group of like-minded people. When people come together, we can get more done. So joining either a neighborhood group of folks who are concerned in your neighborhood about something happening, or a statewide organization, right? Like a group like CALPIRG or a group like the Solar Rights Alliance. as a collective, you can just get a lot more done. At the same time, there are things that you can do as an individual when you see rip-offs in your community for consumers or potential hazards. You should speak out about that. So you could, call your legislator or write to your legislator. You could write a letter to the editor in your newspaper. Those kinds of things really do help get the attention of decision makers.
I love this. Yeah. Just like call them what you think. Tell them about your personal experience. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, the power of good information. You mentioned that. And I just had an experience with CALPIRG about this exact thing. My daughter, she loves to go thrifting at Goodwill, and she's got a good eye for deals. And she came home not too long ago with an Alexa that she was able to get for like $10. She was so excited about being able to just say, hey, play this music that I want. There's a reason why we don't have Alexa in our house. Like, I'm very concerned about the privacy invasion and risks of that. She didn't know that, but of course I'm dad, so I'm the wet blanket. So I was like, actually, like maybe I would let you use that Alexa, but I need you to understand what the security and privacy risks are, and convince me that you can lock down those risks and use it safely. And so I asked her to go on the internet and do a little research and then come to me and convince me. And she did. But what was interesting was most of the info that she found on that first pass was literally stuff from either Amazon or, like, when I was reading it, I was like, is somebody getting paid to write this? Like, I just couldn't figure out, like, literally as a parent, what if this info was really good or not, or if there was a self-interest behind it. So I asked my daughter to just like dig a little harder for like just some independent, something that seemed a little more independent. And so she did, like, to her credit. And she came on an article that you guys, that CALPIRG had published online about Alexa. And it did exactly what it was supposed to do, which was outline what the risks are and then how you as a consumer can essentially mitigate those risks through different settings. And I knew, because it was coming from CALPIRG, I know you guys are really careful about this stuff, that it was a good source of information. And so I was just like, wow, you know, at Solar Rights Alliance, we have a whole consumer guide, and we take, you know, we put a lot of energy into making sure that the info we give people is like really, really good, really, really useful. And I was like, is there a Solar Rights Alliance article for like Alexa? And lo and behold, CALPIRG had it. And so it really is the power of good information for people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that consumers, they need to be empowered to make good decisions by having, you know, the real kind of the real information out there. Like, transparency is really critical. It's key for consumers to know the truth about you know, all the potential harms, you know, of products, whether it's to our safety or privacy.
Well, Jenn Engstrom from the California Public Interest Research Group, thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to working with you going forward.
Thanks, Jen.
Of course.
So now it's time for Solar Heroes, where we give a shout out to an awesome Solar Rights Alliance member. So Dave, who's our solar hero for this episode?
The solar hero for this episode is Gerard, who has single-handedly made it easier for tens of thousands of people to get rooftop solar.
Gerard is amazing, and I have worked with him extensively to get cities and counties across the state of California to follow the law. It's called the Solar Access Act, or SB 379, and it requires pretty much all cities and counties across the state of California to have streamlined, automatic, online, instantaneous permitting for both rooftop solar and storage that also verifies code compliance. And the law was passed several years ago, but cities were, shall we say, slow to adopt this law. And we realized that they needed to hear from the people who lived there, to say to them, look, we just want you to follow the law. And Gerard was really excited by this idea because he recognized that when we can cut this red tape, we can make it easier and faster for people to go solar. Now, most folks who worked on this effort did it just in their city. Gerard came to me and said, all right, I live up in Northern California. Give me all the cities that have not yet followed the law. I want to call them all. And I was like, sure, go for it. And folks, I'm telling you, dozens and dozens and dozens of cities and counties, not just in Northern California, but eventually across the entire state of California, are complying with the Solar Access Act because of Gerard. Thank you, Gerard. Just incredible, incredible work. Thank you.
Yeah, in addition to just working hard, Gerard's just really smart. I really just appreciate he's a very strategic advocate, and then also just has a good sense of just like what makes rooftop solar so powerful. So he has, as you know, Cailey, really advised us to talk a lot about just like the positivity of rooftop solar and just like how really emphasize why we're so optimistic that despite the nonsense and overwhelming power of the utility and these stupid attacks, that really, if we just keep doing what we're doing, rooftop solar is going to prevail. We're really going to be able to have this be something that's in the hands of everyone, just like cars and TVs and cell phones. And so thank you, Gerard, for being a part of this movement. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, Gerard.
And now let's check in with our action team. Cailey, what's the latest at the Solar Rights Action Center now that AB 942 has been defanged and the state Supreme Court has kicked the lawsuit against NEM 3 back to the State Court of Appeals?
Well, one of the things that we learned this legislative session is that when enough people contact their elected representative, they are far more likely to vote with us to defend our rooftop solar rights than they are to cave and side with the monopoly utilities who give them thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. So the key thing is to build the Solar Rights Alliance, to grow our power so that we have more capacity to stop bad bills and more capacity to pass good bills. Ideally, before they ever start. And the way to grow the Alliance is to share the sign up link with everybody you know. It's right here on the screen, solarrights.org/sign up. There are 150,000 members of the Solar Rights Alliance across the state of California. If every single one of those folks shared this link with one other person, we would double the power of the Solar Rights Alliance. And right now, legislators are home in their districts. So this is the moment to build the power of the Solar Rights Alliance, to invite everybody you know to sign up for these alerts. It's free. We always protect your privacy and never share your information.
That's right. When we work together, that's how we have the power to overcome the utilities, defend our investments, and grow the freedom and independence of rooftop solar. So thanks to everyone who has been sharing this link and getting people to sign up. And thanks in advance to the folks who are going to do that now going forward. And it's important to take a moment to remember what it is that we're fighting for.
That's right, Dave. And this is the moment in the podcast when we get to chat with someone who is a solar user out there in the state of California about why solar matters to them, why it matters to defend the basic right to make energy from the sun. And I am so honored that we get to have Yvette here with us today to share a little bit about her solar story. So Yvette, first, I'd just love to know, why did you go solar?
Oh gosh, well, I was aware of the power of solar, being able to provide such an incredible resource for us here on planet Earth. As a kid, when I was about 7 years old, my dad put passive solar on our house. It's not generating electricity, but you have water flowing through these panels with that are preheating the water before it goes to your water tank. And so a very, very easy passive way to do it. And I thought, oh, that's really cool, Dad. So from that time on, PV electric wasn't really that much of a thing then, but it was still in the back of my mind. And then when I came up to Humboldt State University, I became a co-director at this campus center for appropriate technology. That was the first place I ever lived that had photovoltaic on the roof. Finally, my husband and I put on solar panels in San Francisco when it was time to put in a new roof. So that was back in 2016. And so from then, I have been trying to be a solar champion for all the things that are affecting solar users at this time, which you're also aware of. And I'm just so happy to be part of the fight and the truth telling about what's going on. I still fight for it because I never want ourselves in the future to be curtailed by this, or anyone who wants solar to be disincentivized by some of the policies that are happening in California.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're so glad, like you said, that you are part of this fight. And as you said, so much has changed, right? You know, we've been finding that folks tend to have sort of a solar moment where the capacity of rooftop solar, how awesome it is, just sort of hits them like a lightning strike. And I would love to hear if you have a solar moment like that comes to mind.
Well, I guess it's just, like I mentioned, this was back in the 80s when I was the co-director at the first place that we ever had solar. So it's been, I'd have to go way back in time to say, I'm sure it was back then that I had this solar moment where it was so novel. There was no one that I knew who had PV panels on their house. And here we were having people come to our house, asking about them, giving information, saying how it's feasible. And so that was really my exciting time to be able to tell people, I live in a house where we get our electricity from the sun. Isn't that cool? And it really was. So I'd have to say it was way back then, over 40 years ago, that I had my aha moment. I'm glad we've passed that hump. And now that we have people who are thinking like that's an option for them, like it's not novel really anymore to say, I'm going to put PV panels on my roof. It's more mainstream. It's just the decision of should we do it now? Should we do it later? Is it going to economically make sense for us?
Right.
So that's a big shift. It's just taken an awfully long time to get here.
It's funny. Now that as you're telling your story, I'm remembering my aha moment might have been 40 years ago as well, when I think I got this is in the 80s, and I got my first solar powered calculator for math class. And, and I do remember thinking wow, this calculator runs on solar energy. Exactly.
I still have mine. That's awesome.
Oh my God. It must have crossed my mind at some point. I was like, could this thing ever run a house? Like, no way. That just, it could run a calculator, but not a house.
Yeah, well, I gotta say, okay, as you both are telling this story, like suddenly my moment is also coming to me, and it wasn't 40 years ago, but it was a long time ago. I was in middle school, and they were having us do a science experiment to see how quickly we could heat water. And my dad and I worked on building it was just a box that had foil inside it with a black tube. And it was set up so that gravity would like move the water through the tube. I won. And it showed me, my water was the hottest, like it got to the highest temperature in the time that was allowed. And it showed me what the power of the sun can do. And I never forgot that. And just like you, Dave, I remember thinking, I was like, I wonder if this could be used to cook something.
Mm-hmm.
But the funniest thing of all is that, Yvette, you still have that calculator.
Yeah, I love that.
This is my second solar calculator.
Fantastic.
I take really good care of it. Yeah. And yeah, I'd have
great.
to say, there are these really, simple things that show the power of the sun. And it's super great that, kids are learning this. But in terms of adults and where we need to go large scale, because, our demands now are so much beyond just being able to use a solar cooker, which is super great and super cool. But
Right.
we have big fish to fry, especially if we're talking about, some of these data centers coming online or this idea of AI, just reasons to use energy.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that we're going to need a heck of a lot more electricity, no matter what path we go on as a state. That seems to be a pretty secure given. So the question is that going to come from these big, giant, faraway power lines that the utilities get to profit from, tens of thousands of millions of dollars, or is that going to come from rooftop solar on parking lots and roofs that already exist in the built environment? What path, California, are we going to wind up taking?
There's a common position that seems pretty common sense to me. Like you can love AI and go full steam ahead, and you can be really worried about AI and go, let's put on the brakes. And you could agree that, look, there's a lot more electricity that's going to be used going forward. And we're probably going to need large scale solar farms and wind farms and more power lines and that kind of thing. Like, I don't think anyone's saying don't do that, but it's just to say, for the love of God, we have so many rooftops and parking lots that don't have solar panels on them that should. Why wouldn't we first say, let's fill out and build out all of that, all of it, 100% of it. And then once we've totally hit that ceiling, then let's talk about the additional expensive long distance infrastructure that we might need to put in place.
Yeah, and first things first, getting rid of a guaranteed return on investment by monopoly utilities.
Right.
That's even Adam Smith would say that's the father of capitalism. That is so perverse. It is the most perverse way to have a public good that you have to use their service. And they get a guaranteed rate. It's like having a grocery store in your neighborhood saying they are guaranteed, this is the only grocery store. It's the only place you can get your food. But, they really deserve to have a rate of return on investment because people need to invest in it. Well, they're investing it by even shopping there at all in the first place.
Yeah, utilities are like acts like such entitled brats. Like just the entitlement and sense of like, you owe us is just unreal.
Yeah, exactly. Or that's somehow the ratepayers owe them a profit. We owe them a profit.
Yeah, so backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. This has been so much fun. Did you have any last thoughts you wanted to share with listeners?
Yeah, I would just say keep shouting from the rooftops that there are so many challenges that are being imposed on rooftop solar that should not be imposed on us. There's so much benefit to it. Let's just let those who are getting in the way be confronted with the truth that they are getting in the way. People know that and recognize that the power is really in our hands.
Thank you so much, Yvette.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. What a great show. Thanks for joining us today.
And thank you to everyone who took action this legislative session to defend your right to make energy from the sun.
Heck yeah. Thanks for tuning into Solar Freedom, where we put the power back in your hands and give you the tools to defend the freedom and independence of rooftop solar. Bye for now.
Bye, folks.